Hi, I'm Matt, and this is an abbreviated version of Borders on Budgets from Checkpoint Charlie in Berlin, Germany. Succinctly, traveling is a privilege, and for which I am grateful for having the ability to travel and for having a YouTube channel about travel. Of course, traveling is a privilege for a number of reasons, least of which, or most of which, might be the passport one carries, and for which I am grateful for having a Canadian passport that allows me to travel to many places on the planet without many problems. And of course, traveling is also a privilege because of the financial ability or the financial means in order to sustain oneself on the road, and I'm grateful for having that ability. And finally, the ability to move about or without too many hindrances. And so I'm also grateful for having the physical ability to travel. I say this especially here at Checkpoint Charlie because not only do I recognize this today, it was 30 years ago, actually 31 years ago, 1988, August, a summer evening, where I sat there. And although Checkpoint Charlie now is a model of what it used to be, that's a fairly close resemblance to what the border post had been in the late 80s. And so I was here in, West Berlin, and on a summer's evening, I was looking eastward across the wall, the Berlin Wall. And for 2 hours, I sat, behind that bus, but for 2 hours, I sat at the border post. And on a clear evening, not unlike that which I'm experiencing now in late October, but on a clear evening, as I was watching the wall, and specifically the two sets of flags, the West German flag, black, gold, and orange, and the East German flag, black, gold, and orange, with the hammer, compass, and the wheat sheaves. East Germany, lousy country, great flag. Nonetheless, as I was watching these flags, and I was seated at the border post, and I'm going to walk back there right now. At the time, I was 18, and this would have been my first European trip and first solo excursion. And if I was 18, the U.S. Marine who was manning the post that evening, he couldn't have been that much older than I was. And the East German Border Patrol, which would have been, say about 100 meters in that direction, just over where the police is having a patrol this evening, the East German Border Patrol in his watchtower, he too couldn't have been much older than I was, 19, 20. So here were three of us, Canadian, American, East German, all of the same age. And it was at that point, in August of 1988, that I had the epiphany to recognize how fortunate I was then, if not specifically now, but how fortunate I was then to have had the ability to travel. Because not only would I have been traveling on a Canadian passport, but in 1988, that Canada might have been one of the very few countries that not only did not have any military obligations or significant military obligations, certainly none that were mandatory of its male citizens. Whereas in Western Europe, NATO particularly, all males, 18, 19, 20, they would have had to have had some sort of military service. The United States, even though it doesn't have the draft any longer, it has always operated under selective service. And back in the late 80s, if not today as well, for American males, the military is a viable career option. Certainly back in 1988, where the wall stood, it also divided, of course, west from the east, and it was in the socialist bloc countries that all males would have had to have had military service, as well as numerous other countries on the planet. So if as a Canadian I could travel then on a free passport, I recognized how fortunate I was, and probably if you were to have asked randomly 100 people on the planet, would they have traded places with me then, given that all I was doing was traveling and had the wherewithal to do so? Yeah, 95 out of 100 would trade places with me then, and perhaps admittedly even today. So I recognized through travel, and specifically here at Checkpoint Charlie, and to see what freedom means, and the ability with freedom, what that allows, including the luxury of travel, how lucky I was then, if not now, to have this ability. So I share this with you, especially here at Checkpoint Charlie, where upon returning to Berlin 31 years later, I was also here in 1989 before the wall fell, that for whatever grievances I or one may have when they travel, boy, these grievances more often than not are quite minor in the grand scale of things, in the grand scheme of things, and that yes, many people on this planet would be very grateful to have the opportunities that well, travelers often have. And so with that, this also gives me an opportunity to say thank you to Europe, because this also concludes what is a 6-month journey for Borders on Budgets that included Poland, Belarus, Lithuania, Norway, and Russia, besides Berlin. And it has been a very productive 6 months of 2019. So, I thank you very much for allowing me to share my thoughts, to share my memories of Berlin from 1988 and then 1989, when in fact I did visit the DDR, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. Here's a look at my passport from 30 years ago. And yes, so thank you very much for allowing me to share. In the meantime, I look forward to seeing you on the next episode, and I know where I'll be when this video comes out. So, thank you once again, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.